Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been walking through the thick Amazon jungle for 3 hours when she heard something that made her stop dead in her tracks. It wasn't the usual sounds of birds singing or monkeys calling to each other. This was different. It was like someone was humming a song, but the melody was unlike anything she had ever heard before. Elena wiped the sweat from her forehead and adjusted her heavy backpack. She was supposed to be checking air quality levels for her research project, but curiosity got the better of her. The humming was coming from somewhere deeper in the jungle, past a wall of thick vines and enormous trees that blocked out most of the sunlight. As a scientist who had spent 15 years studying unusual life forms, Elena had learned to trust her instincts. Something told her this wasn't just another jungle sound. She pushed through the green curtain of leaves, careful not to trip over the twisted roots that covered the forest floor like nature's own obstacle course. The humming grew louder and more beautiful as she got closer. It reminded her of wind chimes, mixed with whale songs, if that made any sense. Elena found herself walking faster, drawn by the mysterious melody that seemed to dance through the humid air. Then she saw her. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she stepped into a small clearing, where rays of golden sunlight managed to break through the jungle canopy. There, sitting cross-legged on a bed of soft moss, was a young woman unlike anyone Elena had ever seen. The girl appeared to be in her early 20s, but there was something ancient and wise about her large, dark eyes that seemed to shimmer like pools of starlight. Her skin had a subtle glow to it, changing colors very slowly from pale blue to soft green as Elena watched in amazement. She was completely comfortable in her natural state, sitting peacefully as if the jungle was her living room. What struck Elena most was how perfectly the girl seemed to belong here. Colorful butterflies landed on her shoulders without fear, and a small monkey sat nearby, chattering softly as if having a conversation. Exotic flowers had somehow grown in a perfect circle around where she sat, creating a natural garden that looked too beautiful to be real. The girl noticed Elena watching and turned her head slowly. When their eyes met, Elena felt something incredible happen. Without saying a single word, she somehow understood that this wasn't just any lost person. Images flashed through Elena's mind like a movie playing at super speed. She saw stars and distant planets, a silver ship falling through Earth's atmosphere and crash landing somewhere in this very jungle weeks ago. Elena blinked hard, wondering if the jungle heat was making her imagine things. But when she looked again, the girl was still there, still glowing softly, still watching her with those impossibly knowing eyes. The girl slowly stood up, moving with the grace of a dancer. She was taller than Elena had first thought, with long limbs that seemed perfectly proportioned despite being unusually extended. Her fingers were slightly longer than normal human fingers, and when she moved, it was like watching water flow. Elena tried to speak but found her voice stuck in her throat. The girl tilted her head, studying Elena's face with genuine curiosity. Then she did something that nearly made Elena fall over backward. She began to speak, but not with words. Instead, Elena could somehow hear her thoughts, feel her emotions, understand her story as clearly as if someone was telling it to her out loud. The girl's name was something that sounded like music itself, but Elena's human mind could only grasp part of it. The closest she could come was Zara. She had been exploring space with her people when her ship experienced a terrible malfunction. The crash landing had destroyed her vessel completely, leaving her stranded on this strange blue planet with no way to contact her home world. But rather than panic or despair, Zara had done something remarkable. She had learned to live with the jungle as if it were her new family. The trees provided shelter when it rained. The fruits and plants somehow told her which ones were safe to eat and which ones to avoid. The animals had accepted her as one of their own, offering companionship and protection. Elena watched in wonder as Zara demonstrated her connection to the jungle. She placed her hand on a nearby tree trunk, and Elena could swear the leaves rustled with happiness. A bright red parrot flew down and perched on Zara's arm, squawking what sounded almost like words in a language Elena didn't recognize. This was impossible. Everything Elena was seeing went against every scientific principle she had learned in her decades of study. Yet here it was, happening right in front of her eyes. A being from another world, living in perfect harmony with Earth's most complex ecosystem, communicating without words, and somehow making Elena feel more peaceful than she had felt in years. As the afternoon sun began to set, painting the jungle in shades of orange and gold, Elena realized her life had just changed forever. She was looking at the most important discovery in human history. But more than that, she was looking at someone who needed help, protection, and most importantly, a friend who could help her understand this strange new world she had found herself in. Elena slowly reached into her backpack and pulled out a bottle of water and an energy bar. She offered them to Zara, who examined them with the same curiosity Elena might show when discovering a new species of plant. It was the beginning of what Elena knew would be an incredible journey of discovery, friendship, and learning for both of them. The next morning, Elena woke up in her small tent feeling like she had dreamed the entire encounter. But when she unzipped her tent flap and looked outside, there was Zara sitting quietly by the remains of a small fire, watching the sunrise paint the jungle in brilliant colors. Elena rubbed her eyes and stepped outside. Zara turned and smiled at her, an expression so warm and genuine that Elena felt her scientific skepticism melting away. This was real. This was actually happening. Elena had brought her research equipment into the jungle, including a tablet computer, some basic drawing materials, and her scientific instruments. She had an idea. If Zara could somehow communicate through thoughts and feelings, maybe they could find other ways to share information too. Elena sat down across from Zara and pulled out a notebook and pencil. She drew a simple picture of herself, then pointed to herself and said, "Elena," slowly and clearly. Zara watched with intense interest, those large eyes studying every movement Elena made. Then Elena drew a simple stick figure with longer limbs and handed the pencil to Zara, pointing at her. Zara took the pencil carefully, examining it like it was made of gold. She had clearly never seen anything like it before. After a few moments of experimentation, she began to draw. What came out on the paper took Elena's breath away. Zara didn't. Just draw a stick figure. She created an incredibly detailed sketch of a world Elena had never imagined. There were floating cities among the clouds, beings with the same ethereal glow as Zara, and landscapes that looked like they belonged in a dream. Elena pointed at the drawing and then at Zara, raising her eyebrows in question. Zara nodded enthusiastically and began drawing more pictures. She showed Elena her ship before it crashed, a sleek silver vessel that looked more like a work of art than a machine. She drew the moment of the crash, her ship falling through Earth's stormy skies like a shooting star, but the most amazing drawing was the last one. Zara sketched the jungle around them, but she drew it the way she saw it. Every tree had a soft aura of light. The animals were connected by thin lines of energy. Even the flowers seemed to pulse with life. Elena realized she was seeing the world through completely different eyes. Over the following days, their communication system grew more sophisticated. Elena brought out her tablet and showed Zara photographs of cities, people, cars, and airplanes. Zara's reactions were priceless. She touched the screen gently, amazed that the pictures were somehow trapped inside the flat surface. When Elena showed her a video of people walking through a busy street, Zara jumped back in surprise, then leaned closer in fascination. In return, Zara began teaching Elena about her world and her abilities. She showed Elena how she could change the color and temperature of her skin by simply thinking about it. When she was happy, her skin glowed with warm golden light. When she was sad or worried, it shifted to cooler blues and purples. Elena watched in amazement as Zara demonstrated perfect camouflage, her skin matching the colors and patterns of whatever she was near. The most incredible discovery came when Elena realized that Zara could actually communicate with the jungle itself. Elena watched as Zara placed her hands on different plants and trees, somehow sensing what they needed. She led Elena to a tree that looked perfectly healthy but was apparently struggling with some kind of internal problem. Zara showed Elena exactly where to look, and sure enough, Elena found evidence of a rare fungal infection that her trained eye had completely missed. Elena began to understand that Zara's people had evolved differently from humans. They didn't need clothes because their skin provided perfect protection and temperature control. They didn't need complex technology because they had learned to work with nature instead of against it. They had developed abilities that humans could barely imagine, like sensing the emotions and needs of other living things. But Elena also noticed that Zara was becoming restless. She would often stand at the edge of their small clearing, looking toward the distant sounds of helicopters and airplanes. Elena could see the curiosity in those expressive eyes. Zara wanted to know more about the human world that existed beyond this jungle paradise. Elena faced a difficult decision. She knew that revealing Zara's existence to the world would change everything for both humanity and for Zara herself, but she also knew that keeping Zara hidden in the jungle forever wasn't fair to her either. Zara deserved to experience the full richness of human civilization, even if it meant taking incredible risks. One evening, as they sat together watching the stars appear through gaps in the jungle canopy, Elena made up her mind. She pulled out her tablet and showed Zara pictures of small towns, markets, and shops. She tried to explain through gestures and simple drawings that there was a whole world of humans out there with their own fascinating culture and technology. Zara studied the images carefully, then looked up at Elena with an expression that needed no translation. She was ready to take the next step. She wanted to see what lay beyond the jungle, to understand these humans who had created such amazing things, and to learn about the civilization that Elena belonged to. Elena knew there would be challenges ahead. Zara would need to learn about human customs, social rules, and most importantly, she would need to find a way to fit in without revealing her extraordinary true nature. But looking at this remarkable being who had already shown such incredible adaptability and wisdom, Elena felt confident that together they could figure it out. The jungle had been Zara's sanctuary, but it was time for her real adventure to begin. Elena knew that taking Zara to the nearest town would be complicated, but she hadn't expected it to be quite this overwhelming. The 3-hour jeep ride from the jungle had been an adventure in itself. Zara had never experienced anything like a moving vehicle, and her first reaction was pure terror mixed with fascination. When Elena started the engine, Zara jumped backward so fast she nearly fell over. The loud rumbling noise was completely foreign to someone who had only heard the gentle sounds of nature for months. But within minutes, her natural curiosity took over. She touched every surface inside the Jeep, amazed by the smooth metal and soft fabric seats. As they drove through the winding dirt roads leading out of the jungle, Zara pressed her face against the window like a child seeing the world for the first time, which, in many ways, she was. Elena watched in the rearview mirror as Zara's skin shifted through dozens of colors, reflecting her rapidly changing emotions. Excitement made her glow bright yellow, while confusion turned her a soft purple. The real challenge began when they reached the outskirts of San Miguel, a small town that Elena had visited many times during her research trips. To Elena, it was just a quiet place with a few hundred residents, basic shops, and simple buildings. To Zara, it might as well have been an alien world. Elena had tried to prepare her by wrapping Zara in a large blanket and explaining that humans always covered their bodies in public. but she quickly realized that clothing was the least of their problems. The moment they stepped out of the Jeep, Zara was hit by a wall of sensory input that nearly knocked her over. The sounds were the first shock. Car engines, people talking, radios playing music, dogs barking, chickens clucking, and a dozen other noises all mixed together in what Elena thought of as normal town sounds. But Zara's enhanced hearing made it feel like standing inside a thunderstorm. She grabbed Elena's arm, her eyes wide with panic. Elena quickly guided her to a quiet spot behind the medical clinic where she had planned to meet Dr. Rodriguez, an old friend who she trusted completely. But even in this quieter area, Zara was struggling. Her skin was cycling through colors rapidly, and Elena could see that she was having trouble processing everything at once. Then came the smells. Humans had created so many artificial scents that Elena had never really noticed before. Gasoline from cars, cooking food, cleaning chemicals, perfumes, and soap all combined into an overwhelming mix that made Zara cover her nose and breathe. In short, quick gasps. Dr. Rodriguez emerged from the clinic expecting to meet one of Elena's research assistants. Instead, he found himself face to face with someone who looked human, but clearly wasn't entirely comfortable in human skin. Zara's blanket had slipped, revealing her naturally glowing skin and her obvious discomfort with the basic act of standing. In a town square raised immediate questions. Elena had prepared a story. She told Dr. Rodriguez that Zara was from an isolated indigenous community deep in the jungle who had never experienced modern civilization. It wasn't entirely a lie, Elena told herself. Zara really had been living in isolation, just not on this planet. Dr. Rodriguez was kind and professional, but Elena could see his confusion growing as he tried to examine Zara. Her skin temperature was unlike anything he had encountered. Her heart rate was slower than any human he had ever treated, and her reflexes were so enhanced that she jumped every time he moved suddenly. The most challenging moment came when they entered the clinic building itself. Zara had never been inside a man-made structure before, and the artificial lighting, enclosed spaces, and chemical smells of the medical facility were almost too much for her to handle. She kept looking up at the ceiling, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of being trapped under a roof. Elena watched as Zara tried to make sense of mirrors, light switches, and running water. Each new discovery brought a mixture of wonder and confusion. She understood that the mirror was showing her reflection, but she kept touching the glass, trying to understand how her image was trapped inside. When Dr. Rodriguez turned on the faucet, Zara jumped backward, then cautiously approached the stream of water like it might bite her. But the biggest challenge was helping Zara understand human social rules. She didn't understand why she couldn't touch everything she was curious about. She didn't know that staring at people was considered rude, and she definitely didn't understand why humans seemed so afraid of silence, constantly filling quiet moments with nervous chatter. The worst moment came when a mother with a crying baby entered the clinic waiting room. Zara's natural empathy kicked in immediately. She could sense the baby's distress and the mother's exhaustion, and her first instinct was to help. Without thinking, she approached them and gently touched the baby's forehead. What happened next was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The baby immediately stopped crying, and a soft, peaceful expression crossed its tiny face. But Zara's skin began glowing brighter, and Elena could see that the other people in the waiting room were starting to stare and whisper. Elena quickly intervened, thanking the mother and explaining that Zara had a special way with children, but she could see the suspicion in people's eyes. In a small town like San Miguel, news traveled fast, and someone who looked different and acted strange would be the subject of gossip within hours. As they left the clinic, Elena realized that integrating Zara into human society was going to be much more difficult than she had imagined. It wasn't just about teaching her to wear clothes or use modern conveniences. It was about helping her navigate a completely different way of being alive. But as they walked back to their Jeep, Elena noticed something encouraging. Despite all the overwhelming sensory input and confusion, Zara was still curious. She was still asking questions through their system of gestures and mental impressions. She wanted to understand these strange humans and their complicated world. Elena knew that their biggest test was still ahead of them. Tomorrow, they would venture into an even more complex human environment. They were going shopping. Elena stood outside the small department store in San Miguel, watching Zara stare at the building like it was some kind of mysterious temple. The store wasn't anything special by human standards, just a two-story building with big glass windows displaying colorful clothes and everyday items. But to Zara, it was clearly the most fascinating structure she had ever seen. Through the windows, Zara could see people moving around inside, picking up objects, examining them, and carrying them in small baskets. Her head tilted to one side, the way it did when she was trying to understand something completely new. Elena could almost see the questions forming in Zara's mind. Elena had spent the morning trying to explain the concept of shopping using drawings and gestures. The idea that humans created objects and then exchanged pieces of paper or plastic cards for them was completely foreign to someone whose people simply made what they needed from natural materials. But Zara was a quick learner, and her curiosity was stronger than her confusion. The automatic sliding doors were their first challenge. Elena had completely forgotten how strange they would seem to someone who had never seen them before. When the doors whooshed open as they approached, Zara jumped backward so quickly that she bumped into Elena. Her skin immediately shifted to a nervous blue color, and she grabbed Elena's arm. Elena gently demonstrated how the doors worked, walking back and forth through them several times. Zara watched carefully, then cautiously stepped forward. When the doors opened for her, she gasped and clapped her hands together like a delighted child. It was such a pure expression of joy that Elena couldn't help but smile. Inside the store, Zara's senses were immediately overwhelmed again, but this time in a different way. Instead of the harsh sounds and chemical smells of the medical clinic, she was surrounded by soft music, the gentle rustling of fabric, and the pleasant scent of new clothes. Her skin gradually shifted from nervous blue to a more curious green. The first section they entered was full of women's clothing. Zara had never seen so many different colors and textures in one place. She reached out tentatively to touch a soft cotton t-shirt, then jerked her hand back as if she was afraid of getting in trouble. Elena nodded encouragingly and showed her. It was okay to feel the different fabrics. What happened next was like watching someone discover fire. Zara moved from item to item, her face lighting up with wonder as she experienced silk, denim, wool, and synthetic materials for the first time. Her enhanced senses allowed her to perceive textures in ways that Elena could barely imagine. She would close her eyes and run her fingers over different fabrics, her expression showing that she was experiencing something far richer than Elena's human touch could provide. But Zara's reactions weren't always positive. When she tried on a tight-fitting jacket, she immediately started pulling at it, clearly uncomfortable with how it restricted her movement. Elena realized that someone who had lived in perfect harmony with nature would find human clothing unnecessarily confining. They needed to find items that would satisfy human social requirements while still allowing Zara the freedom she was used to. The fitting room was another adventure entirely. Zara couldn't understand why humans needed a small, private room just to try on clothes. In her world, there was no shame or embarrassment about the natural body. Elena had to carefully explain the concept of privacy and modesty, which led to a fascinating cultural exchange conducted entirely through gestures and facial expressions. Elena watched through the fitting room curtain as Zara experimented with different combinations of clothes. It was like watching an artist at work. Zara had an instinctive sense of color and design that produced beautiful combinations Elena never would have thought of. A simple blue dress paired with a flowing scarf created an elegant look that somehow seemed to enhance Zara's natural grace rather than hide it. The shoe section provided endless entertainment. Zara had been walking barefoot her entire life, and the idea of putting her feet inside rigid containers was almost absurd to her. She tried on sneakers, sandals, and boots, walking around with an exaggerated careful step that made Elena laugh out loud. But when she found a pair of soft, flexible flats that barely felt like wearing anything at all, her face lit up with satisfaction. Other shoppers began to notice them, but not in the suspicious way Elena had feared. Instead, people seemed charmed by Zara's obvious delight in simple things. An elderly woman complimented her on a dress choice. A young mother smiled when Zara waved at her toddler. Elena realized that Zara's genuine happiness and wonder were infectious, making people around her feel good too. The checkout process was perhaps the most educational part of their trip. Elena had tried to explain money using drawings, but watching it in action was completely different. Zara observed carefully as Elena handed plastic cards to the cashier, and somehow items they had selected became their property. The concept of ownership was another puzzle for someone whose people shared everything freely. As they loaded their purchases into shopping bags, Elena noticed that Zara kept looking around at the other customers. Through their developing communication system, Elena understood that Zara was amazed by the diversity of human appearance, behavior, and emotional states. Unlike her people, who were quite similar to each other, humans came in endless varieties. The most touching moment came when they were leaving the store. A small girl, maybe 5 years old, was having a complete meltdown in the parking lot. She had dropped her ice cream and was crying inconsolably, while her frustrated mother tried to calm her down. Zara stopped walking and looked at Elena with questioning eyes. Elena nodded and Zara slowly approached the crying child. Without saying a word, she knelt down to the girl's level and simply smiled. Her skin began to glow with the softest, warmest light, and somehow the child stopped crying and stared in wonder. Zara gently touched the girl's hand, and Elena could see the same peaceful expression cross the child's face that she had seen with the baby at the clinic. The mother looked confused but grateful as her daughter's tears dried up. Elena quickly explained that Zara had a special way with children, and they moved on before too many questions could be asked. As they drove away from the store, Elena looked at Zara in her new human clothes and realized how much had changed in just one day. Zara was still clearly herself, but she had taken a huge step toward understanding and adapting to human society. More importantly, she had found ways to maintain her natural kindness and wonder while learning to navigate this strange new world. The shopping trip had been about much more than buying clothes. It had been Zara's first real integration into human culture, and she had handled it with grace, curiosity, and joy. 6 months had passed since that first shopping trip, and Elena could hardly believe how much both their lives had changed. She stood in her kitchen, watching Zara prepare breakfast with the same careful attention to detail that she brought to everything she did. Zara had learned to use human tools and appliances, but she still approached each task like she was conducting a beautiful experiment. The morning routine had become one of Elena's favorite parts of the day. Zara would wake up before dawn and spend a few minutes on the back porch, letting her skin glow freely in the darkness before the neighbors might wake up and see her. Elena had learned that this was like meditation for Zara, a way to connect with her true self before putting on the careful disguise of being human. Getting Zara official identity documents had been one of their biggest challenges. Elena had called in several favors from old friends in government offices, creating a believable backstory about Zara being from a remote village with no previous records. The story wasn't perfect, but it was enough to get her a basic ID card and social security number. The learning process had been incredible to watch. Zara's intelligence was beyond anything Elena had encountered. She absorbed new information like a sponge, But more than that, she understood the deeper patterns behind everything she learned. When Elena taught her to read, Zara didn't just memorize words. She grasped the entire structure of language in ways that allowed her to start reading advanced texts within weeks. Their biggest breakthrough had come when Elena introduced Zara to the internet. Sitting together at Elena's laptop, they had opened up the entire world of human knowledge. Zara spent hours watching videos of different countries, cultures, and ways of life. She was particularly fascinated by documentaries about environmental, conservation, and animal behavior. But it was Zara's impact on Elena's research that had been truly remarkable. Elena's scientific papers had always been well respected, but since Zara had started contributing her insights, their work had reached an entirely new level. Zara could sense things about plant and animal behavior that no human instrument could detect. She could predict weather patterns days in advance just by feeling changes in the air pressure and humidity. Their collaboration had led to discoveries that were revolutionizing environmental science. Elena published their findings under both their names, and Zara was quickly gaining recognition as one of the most insightful young researchers in the field. Other scientists were amazed by her intuitive understanding of ecological systems, never suspecting the true source of her knowledge. The shopping trips had become a regular part of their routine, but they had evolved far beyond basic necessity. Zara had developed her own unique sense of style that somehow managed to be both perfectly human and subtly otherworldly. She favored flowing fabrics in earth tones that didn't restrict her movement, and she had a talent for finding accessories that seemed to enhance her natural grace. More importantly, these trips had become opportunities for Zara to practice her social skills. She had learned to make small talk with cashiers, to navigate crowded spaces without becoming overwhelmed, and to blend in with groups of humans without drawing unwanted attention. Elena watched with pride as Zara helped other shoppers find items they were looking for or offered gentle assistance to elderly customers struggling with heavy bags. The most significant change had been in how Zara viewed Earth itself. In their first days together, she had been focused on survival, then on understanding human culture. But now, Elena could see that Zara had truly begun to think of Earth as her home. She spoke passionately about protecting the planet's forests and oceans. She had developed deep friendships with their neighbors and colleagues. She had found purpose in their shared research work. Elena had worried that Zara might become sad or homesick as time passed. But the opposite seemed to be happening. While Zara still hoped to eventually contact her home planet, she no longer seemed to think of Earth as just a temporary stopping place. She talked about long-term projects they could work on together, places on Earth she wanted to visit, and ways they could make a positive impact on environmental conservation. Their evening walks had become another cherished routine. They would hike into the less populated areas around town, where Zara could let her skin glow freely and practice some of her natural abilities. Elena loved watching Zara communicate with wildlife or demonstrate her perfect camouflage skills. These moments reminded Elena of just how extraordinary her friend really was. The most beautiful development had been Zara's growing connection with the local community. She volunteered at the town's environmental education center, where her natural way with children and animals made her incredibly popular. Kids would follow her around during nature walks, hanging on her every word as she explained the interconnections between different plants and animals. Elena had initially worried about Zara's ability to maintain her secret identity, but she had underestimated her friend's wisdom and adaptability. Zara had learned to control her skin's color changes so well that they were barely noticeable unless someone was looking specifically for them. She had developed explanations for her unusual insights that made her seem like someone with exceptional intuition rather than someone with supernatural abilities. Their research lab had become a second home for both of them. Elena would often find Zara there late at night, poring over environmental data or working on new theories about sustainable living. They were secretly developing plans for what they called Earth-friendly communities that would combine human technology with the natural harmony that Zara's people had mastered. The project was ambitious beyond anything Elena had ever imagined. They were designing living spaces that would work with natural ecosystems rather than disrupting them. They were developing new approaches to agriculture that would restore soil health while providing abundant food. They were even working on communication systems that would help humans better understand and protect wildlife. Elena knew that if they succeeded, their work could change the entire relationship between human civilization and the natural world. And it had all started with a shopping trip to help an alien girl learn to fit in with human society. As Elena watched Zara carefully tend to the garden they had planted together behind the house, she marveled at the journey they had both taken. Zara had learned to navigate grocery stores and shopping malls, to wear clothes and use computers, to blend in perfectly with human society. But more importantly, she had found ways to share her extraordinary gifts while building a life that honored both her alien heritage and her chosen human home. The girl who had once lived free in the jungle, glowing with starlight, had become a bridge between two worlds. And Elena couldn't wait to see what incredible discoveries their partnership would bring next.